Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. I'm your host, Hamid Rasheed. We're glad that you could take time out to join us. Today we'll be talking about politics. I have joining me on the program Dr. Kwame Kalimara, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of New Africa and Dean of the National Conference of Black Lawyers Community College of Law and International Diplomacy in Chicago. Brother Kalimara, welcome to the program.
Asante sana, habari gani, my brother?
I guess the first question that we should touch on is what brings you to Halifax?
Well, there's been a collective, a European collective, who is presently located here in Halifax, who traditionally has done some analysis on various liberation movements inside the United States. They invited me to come up and speak to them in terms of giving them some clarity on the ideology of the Republic of New Africa, clarifying essentially some of the notions of how members of the white left can contribute to the New African independence movement, as well as to allow me to speak with the New African community, the African community here in Nova Scotia, because early on that was one of my requests. If I was going to come up to Nova Scotia, I had to have an opportunity to meet with African people here, and that is, of course, in any liberation movement involving African people, our first and primary task is to share information and to begin to greet and exchange ideas with our people, no matter where they might be geographically.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, some of the viewers of the program who watched the political developments in the United States in the 1960s and early 70s might be familiar with the Republic of New Africa. But I suspect that a lot of our viewers would not have any notion of what the Republic is. Could you give us some idea of what the Republic is?
Okay, the Republic of New Africa is actually the name of the colonized, subjugated black nation in North America. We're talking about 5 states in the United States. We're talking about Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. The provisional government of the Republic of New Africa believes that because historically we've had a numerical majority on this land, because we have worked on this land and built upon this land through the chattel slavery period to date, and because it many times in history we've fought to stay on that land, that land belongs to us as a people. But there are certain other historical facts that should be laid too. The provisional government as an entity began in March 31 of 1968 in Detroit, Michigan, where over 500 black nationalists from across the country, various educational backgrounds, various class backgrounds, and things of that nature, came together addressing the fact that black people, New African people, the state of affairs was very serious, and we needed a solution that would ensure the type of human rights that been afforded other peoples within the borders of the United States that was not afforded New African people. And that was, the analysis was that there must be a separate nation. There must be a land base where black people control the life-sustaining institutions and control every part of their life, the economy, the system of governance, things of that nature. In 1968, they issued a Declaration of Independence, which also articulated the aims and goals of the revolution, and basically sort of set out the type of construct for the building and the development of that new society. But I must add, though, that this nation was created, as we argue, in the year 1660, and we say it was created by the peculiar type of colonization, peculiar type of apartheid law, segregationist law that existed within this Western Hemisphere. That is, that our people clearly were illegally kidnapped from Africa, clearly were subject to forced labor, exploitation, oppression, but there are some other facts that make this our people, African people in the Western Hemisphere, a new African people, and that being that the slave master raped African women. So we have some European genes within our bodies. There were traditionally political and military alliances with the native peoples of America, and that, as well as trying to maintain those semblances of African culture and African religion, African way of speech, that which existed, the cultural imperialism of the Euro-American nation that existed, it sort of brought about an amalgamation which basically created what we term to be a new African people, because clearly we did not have which we had in Africa, on the continent of Africa. We don't speak our native tongue. For the most part, we did not have our native names. We have had the brands of our slave master, and those people whom we see right now with names other than European, that being African names, is because of the growing consciousness and awareness and the attempt of our people to try to recapture that which we have lost and begin to put forward and push forward the type of Afrocentric or African worldview necessary to put the balance and harmony back in the world. And I want to state further that the so-called separatist movement or secessionist movement for African people is also not a new thing. It dates back to the 1600s and to the early 1800s, when Haiti in 1804 became the first independent free black republic in the Western Hemisphere. But dealing specifically with the United States, all one has to do is begin to put forward the analysis and look at the slave rebellions and look forward and examine, for example, the maroon societies in our national territory down south and what they did. I mean, once they escaped from the plantation, what did they do? They began to go in the hills and set up self-governing territories where they were independent, and they basically satisfied every need possible for the continued viability of those self-governing territories. And also, there has to be an acknowledgement, even in U.S. American law during the Reconstruction period, of these types of things. There were, for example, in Davis Bend, Mississippi, just during subsequent to the height of the American Civil War, under General Ulysses Grant, Captain John Eaton had set up and allowed to set up some self-governing territories where there were over 72,000 newly freed Africans who set up self-governing territories. And prior to that, there was a General Sherman in the South Carolina Seas Islands who, through the grant of various U.S. laws that allowed these types of self-governing territories. I mean, so historically we have to recognize that there are even some American legal precedents that allowed that. The Confiscation Acts in 1861 and 1862, the Emancipation Proclamation in, I believe it was 1863, and the Freedmen's Bureau also had recognized these things, but due to the fact that then again African people got caught up into the North-South compromise, you know, like they did early on over the slavery issue and their Declaration of Independence, the compromise was still the same. Basically, the Union passed a General Amnesty Act, which basically nullified the possessory titles that new African people had to those lands, because they were, of course, chattel slaves prior to this legislation. And as a result of their being exploited and that the South being in rebellion, there was good justification, even in international law, to recognize that that land would belong to those newly freed slaves. There's an international principle called jus sole, which basically is, I guess, a fancy term for reparations. I mean, considering the fact that we were kidnapped, I mean, international banditry, the exploitation, the slavery, the forced labor, not being paid. I mean, all of these types of things recognize that the new African land belonged to new African people. Because of that, I mean, I think the more current term that sort of would make that connection for people would probably be squatters' rights, or adverse possession would be the term that people most readily would recognize. But see, we even have even further claims to this land when we really begin to look at the historic military alliances with the native peoples of America.
Now, when you say this land, are you referring specifically to the states that have now been identified, the Mississippi and so on? Are you referring to the title to lands in these particular states?
In those, primarily because of the military and political alliances with the native peoples that existed during that period of time, and as well as the fact that we had a much larger concentration of our people in those states. In many of those states we had numerical majority, but due to the conclusion of the Civil War and Reconstruction and the rise of the white vigilante, white supremacist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, there was in effect an exodus which allowed for a lot of our people who were traditionally first brought to the so-called Black Belt South, migrated up to up north to Chicago, to Detroit, New York, various other places, and some people even migrated to various places in Canada.
Well, I want to pick up on that point. You've indicated that you'd want to establish the state in the southern belt. The demographics of the situation now in 1982 are that there isn't any single one of those states where blacks are in majority. I think Mississippi is probably the largest. I think
right.
Something like 40% black and 60% Caucasian. How would you establish? I think our viewers would be interested in knowing how you would establish such a nation in these particular states, given the fact that the demographics are such that the Caucasian community far outnumbers the black community.
Well, first of all, I think what we have to clearly recognize is that this is a national liberation movement. It's a revolutionary movement, the New African Independence movement, and clearly the United States has no intention of giving up that land without a fight, even though all of the legal precedents and international law would recognize and support that. I mean, we have to recognize, the fundamental rule of power and power politics and in military politics. I'd have to say that the whole issue of the new African population coming back to the national territory, the Republic of New Africa, would come about as a result of a migration. Just as during the Reconstruction period and the post-Reconstruction period, there was a migration up north because there was a facade of a better piece of the pie or whatever. You can really get the land of milk and honey up north. It's going to be sort of the same type of thing that is going to bring our people back to the South, meaning a much clearer understanding of, say, mankind's or humankind's relationship with land, and the fact that clearly that myth that the North was better and there was no racial oppression or racial segregation and things of that nature has been dispelled, and the fact that the U.S. Colonial imperial state is going to intensify the repression on new African people in the United States in total. And we say that with that intensification, there's going to be inbred a lot more resistance on the above ground as well as the below ground. And when I'm talking about the below ground, I'm talking about clandestine military organizations like the Black Liberation Army and various other New African liberation forces who are going to be fighting in those major cities where up north we do have, for the most part, a sizable percentage. In Detroit, there's, I think, perhaps maybe close to a 50, if not over 50% New African population. Chicago has a sizable New African population. New York, all of these major cities, which are sort of like key industrial areas for the United States, and the fact that they're concerned about that because it poses the threat of a general strike. Also, when we deal with the whole war on above ground at a much later stage in development of the liberation movement, geographically, it's much better to deal with guerrilla warfare in the national territory, the Republic of New Africa.
Well, you kind of raised a rather ironic situation. You've got the territory, the state is being in the south, and you've got what appears to be the bulk of the activity, as I understand, I may be wrong, the bulk of the activity taking place in territory that's external to that, in large northern areas where you have, as you say, you have larger black populations, some of even whom are in excess of the Caucasian community.
Right.
It's been suggested that many of the people that are involved in the Republic and the movement are people who are northerners, who are not from the south. Does that, how do you put that into perspective?
Well, I can say that early on in the genesis of the provisional government of the Republic of Africa, which happens to be just one of the many entities that support land and independence for New African people, that there were I'd say, a much more majority of the people who were involved programmatically in the development of the New African independence movement were from the north, but that also says that there were some people from the south. The work on the south basically had a different character than the work of up north. The work down south, for the most part, because of its rural character, basically dealt with the development of more life-sustaining institutions which would begin to draw the allegiance from the United States of America to the Republic of New Africa. Up north, it was to some degree the same, but it was also preparing people for exodus, to leave the north and come back to the south, as well as deal with the fact that, for the most part, there were more financial resources available up north, and therefore those of us who were working in northern cities would send a lot of our financial resources down south so that we can contribute to the growth and development of our programs down south. But we have to recognize, too, that there is, at least for the Republic of New Africa, an internal strategy and an external strategy. And that is to say that no way, militarily or politically, can New Africa be free without recognizing that you have to deal with the internal and the external. And that is to say that there are northern armies that operate, and when I say armies, I'm even talking about the paramilitary organizations, Nazis. I'm talking about the Ku Klux Klan, and we recognize that they have consolidated within the last month at least 15 major white supremacist organizations. That that has to be a battleground also. I mean, it has to be a battleground, just as when the New African Independence Movement goes one layer further when you talk about the internal and the external. Internally, there are other oppressed nations within the borders of the United States, that being Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rican independence movement, and that being the socialist reunification of Mexico. Those Chicano Mexicanos argue that the border that is imposed in Texas, Colorado, and most of California, et cetera, are illegal borders, and that annexed land belongs to the Mexican, the Chicano Mexicano people. And there, of course, is the Native American Indian land, and those questions, at least in those areas where there's still a sizable numbers of those people. But even further, there is when I say external, I'm talking about the fact that the U.S. has had a history of armed aggression on other nations and other states outside of U.S. borders.
Hmm. Well, now, given what you said earlier, that it's not a common occurrence where people stand on the corner and turn over power and turn over land and so on. Um, is it? What is your prognosis? Will the bringing into reality of this nation, of this new republic, will it be accomplished through military means, or will it be accomplished through other means, or a combination?
It would be a combination. It would be political military, and that is to say that we of the New African Independence Movement say that it is a process of protracted New African People's War. That is to say that during the early 60s, where we witnessed a lot of rebellions across the country. In 1968, there were over 120 rebellions across the United States, where all of the issues were of the oppression, the unemployment, the lack of education, the unequal administration of justice to our people. Even the Kerner Commission report even made that declaration that white racism was key to all of this rebellion. The point is that there were, during that period, a lot of revolutionary conscious New Africans who sort of believed that revolution can happen tomorrow if we just will it, without taking into consideration the level of consciousness of our people and the fact that colonization has done something to our psyche. It has made a vast majority of us who to aspire to be white, to aspire to be European, and to not take any worth in our own African identity and some of our own traditional ways. And when I say traditional ways, I'm not talking about some notion of not dealing with technology or anything like that. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about certain sort of fundamental things in terms of how we relate to ourselves as a people. How do we relate to nature? I mean, that whole notion of being in harmony and understanding that our survival and growth and development is hinged upon our collective resources, as opposed to being very individualistic and trying to amass certain amounts of personal power. The notions of that instantaneous revolution have been dispelled, particularly because of the counterinsurgency COINTEL program that was initiated by J. Edgar Hoover, at that point the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The point is that this revolutionary process, because the United States has a very unique character, because it has internal colonies, because it has the support of the multi-national monopoly capitalistic corporate enterprise within the fact that it colludes with the government. Because of all of this, and because the media can just about paint a particular individual or group in any way they want, we understand that it's going to take a long time to bring forth out of the colored mentality the type of new African being that wants to be self-determined, who wants to build the type of society where he and she can control every aspect of their being, and the fact that we understand that that's part of the political process in terms of educating our people. But there is, of course, like I said, a military aspect that also has to be taken into consideration, considering the so-called might of the U.S. empire, and also destroying the myth that the United States cannot be defeated. Just as Vietnam defeated the U.S., so can the Republic of New Africa defeat the U.S., and so can the other national liberation movements within the U.S.
Why do you feel that it's necessary to have a territory? It would seem to me that the demographics are against it. why could you not have the level of consciousness that you speak of, and why couldn't blacks exercise the kind of control and within the context of the territory that they now occupy and so on? I mean, you see the movements. Many of the larger cities are being taken over by black mayors and so on. Why would you not support that kind of thrust?
Well, basically, what that type of thrust does is that one has the illusion of power in that type of view. You have nothing more than a neo-colonial regime, which is basically sort of like sham independence, or clearly in this instance, sham power.
But would that have to be so? If you had the kind of education programs that I'm sure must be part of your activities, where you had people who had, an appropriate level of consciousness, couldn't there be? Would necessarily follow that you'd have to have this neo-colonial kind of?
Well, as I look at all of the major cities in the United States that have, say, black mayors or whatever, for the most part, those black mayors got into power when those cities were, for the most part, were bordering on the brink of financial bankruptcy, and that those corporate interests that maintain themselves within those cities still maintain and control those cities, and you had an illusion of political power. I think a good example would be Detroit. Detroit, Coleman Young, he's the mayor, asked the question, well, who really controls Detroit? The answer would have to be, it would be General Motors, it would be Ford, it would be Chrysler. Look at, for example, that there's a multi-million-dollar complex, the Renaissance Center, and then go out into the new African communities, and all you see is urban blight. You see rat-infested homes and the types of educational facilities and hospitalization and things of that nature that would give our people the power. I mean, that's just non-existent. And I mean,
well, I want to cut off there. I'm sorry. This is this needs probably 2 or 3 programs to be developed properly, and we're trying to squeeze too much, I realize, within a half hour. But in the 2 or 3 minutes that we have remaining, I want to talk about one of the concrete, specific programs that the Republic of New Africa has going, one that you're very much involved in, and that is your law school, your community law school, and your Center for International Diplomacy. In the 2 or 3 minutes we have left, could you tell us something about your work in that institution?
Okay, the NCBL Community College of Law is an institution that's a little bit over 4 years old, and it was formerly called the Fred Hampton Community College of Law and International Diplomacy after Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther who was assassinated on December the 9th of 1969. The founder of the law school, Dr. Charles Knox, was a Black Panther himself. Basically, the goals and objectives of the law school is to train community advocates, new Africans who are trying to better the conditions in the community, and we feel that once they get the skills that we have to offer, that they can go back and better serve the community because they've got more tools in which to operate, because everything that has to be done in a legal sense does not involve a courtroom. The courtroom is, by and large, the last resort, or the arena of last resort. And it's a growing college. We've been approved by the State Board of Higher Education in Illinois to award Juris Doctor degrees, and it's the type of program that we are trying to branch internationally. And we're experimenting with a center in Montreal and various other programs, even for our professors.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brother Kwame, I want to thank you, and at the same time apologize that we didn't have enough time to go into all of the detail about the movement, but I do want to thank you for being our guest on the program. I want to thank you for watching and invite you back next week. Hello, welcome to another Black Horizons program. We're glad that you could take time out to join us. On Saturday, October 16th, 1982, voters across the province of Nova Scotia went to the polls to elect representatives in the various municipal units across the province. In today's program, we'll be talking with Alderman Graham Downey of Ward 3 in Halifax City. Graham, welcome to the Black Horizons program.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be on the show today.
What were your thoughts, Graham, going into the recent election? Were you confident that you were going to win your seat from the beginning?
Well, I looked at it that way. It was a tough election, especially with four other candidates. It made it a little bit tough. So I sort of went over poll by poll, which we won in 1980. We won we won all 26 polls then, and I broke it down that with four other candidates in there, that the vote would be split, and I just figured that by breaking it up like that the split would come in my favor because of the strength that I have throughout the ward. All parts of the ward I seem to be pretty strong, so I had a fair idea that I would come out on top, although it's always a tough race when you got five in there because, you don't know how the split will go.
That's right. Well, you must be, you had some very tough competition. Alderman, former Alderman, I think the Alderman that preceded you in this ward, actually, Dave McKean was in the race, Frank Boyd and Parsons and so on. You must be very gratified that you were able to win over such tough competition. If you had to explain the reasons as to why you win, what do you think were the main reasons why you were able to maintain the seat?
Well, I would say it's basically the work that I have done over the years. I think since I was elected as the Alderman since '74, I think the work has showed throughout the area, and I think that's the reason why I was able to hold on to the seat. I think we have pushed for a lot of programs, and most of them programs that we said what we could do, we have seen the achievement in the areas. Sidewalks, street improvements, and other things, helping housing. When I get on council, you take the Brunswick Street area and North Street area. They were all boarded up buildings then. Mm-hmm. And if you drive through the area now, you can see the improvements. And I think basically what we were saying in the platform, the work that we have done over the years, that was what I was running on. And I think I could only run on my record. I outlined my record in the brochure, and we asked for continual support. And I think the voters on election day gave me that mandate.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, looking at the Ward 3, what do you think were the main issues going into the election, or what are the main issues as you see them that affect your ward, Ward 3?
I think on the main issues, I would have to say housing. I get a number of calls every day of people looking for housing. I think this is the main issue of the area, and people that are on social assistance and senior citizens who are looking for more money. People on low and fixed income. I think it's an area, basically one part of my area that the needs are there. There's a lot of social problems in there, and I think I have been trying to assist the people in the area and trying to solve those problems over the years. And you just can't solve them overnight, but I think over the years we have solved a great many of them.
Right. You've mentioned that you have been very involved in housing, and one, as you say, has only to drive through the ward to see some of the improvements that have taken place, particularly in the Brunswick Street area. Are those houses going to be available to reasonably accessible to people in your ward, or is it going to be a situation that's happening in a lot of the large cities now where people who want to get close to the downtown area, who perhaps now may be living in the suburbs, are going to come back? Are the houses going to be affordable to area residents?
Yes, what we did in the Brunswick Street area, that was the city in 1978 formed the task force on housing, and out of that we came up with the city's nonprofit housing. It's the first one, mm-hmm. And out of that we restored something like 65 buildings in the area and made them available to, first preference went to people who lived in the area.
Yes.
And these were people with the lower income people. And then the city had land on the corner of Arts and Brunswick Street,
Yes.
which a co-op was formed there, McDonald Co-op, and that is finished now, and those buildings are occupied, and we're looking for in 1983 a proposal in the North Street area on Wood Avenue, which will be another co-op that will really bring great housing available in the area. And just over the last year and a half, when you look at the between the other two levels of government, we have units on Maynard Street that
Yes.
should be finished by November, and on Kennard Street, and some that will take place on Bauer Street that will be open for people on low income.
Hmm. Well, now, this activity in housing, would it be fair to say that there's probably more activity with respect to housing in your ward than in any other ward in the city? Or is it are there comparable developments taking place in other wards as well?
Well, basically, we were saying that in our platform that in Ward 3, that was the only ward in the city that had over the past 2 years where the housing starts have taken place.
Hmm. Well, I'd like to move off the housing issue for a moment and go into another issue that seemed to be quite prevalent in the election, and that was this, particularly in the mayoralty election. A lot of attention was being given to the question of labor relations in the city of Halifax. Some of the mayoralty candidates, candidate Fitzgerald and Maley, were both suggesting that the tack that had been taken by the mayor and the previous council was contributing perhaps to poor labor relations in the city. As a member of that former council, how did you view that issue?
Well, over the past 2 years, and that's looking at it, we had two major strikes. We had the police strike and we had the fireman strike. And I think the council stood strong on both. I think whoever was mayor at that time, they come in at a bad time when both major contracts were up, and I think you look at the mayor didn't have the full control of it because the mayor only gets a vote.
Yes.
On a tie, so the council had the decision to stick either to give in or try and take the labor officer's recommendation. And I think we stood strong, and we were trying to protect the residents of the city, because I think the basic thing what we were saying is the city couldn't afford to give any more, and I think that is what we did. I think sometimes I have spoke out during the fireman strike, because naturally when you have 12 members on council, not every member on council is agreeing what's taking place, but you have to vote on the issue, and there might have been some times where I thought we could have settled the strike, and maybe in my area, looking at the area that is so close, where the houses are close and they're older type buildings, that the residents of my area, I got to be able to protect them, and I wouldn't want to know that if they elected me as their representative of the area, that I should be speaking my views, and I had to speak my views out, what I figured was right. I just couldn't sit back and say, well, I have to go along. I have to let them know that my feelings are to protect them and to protect all the citizens of Halifax, and that's what I tried to do, and sometimes I did speak out against the mayor on the issues.
Right. Well, you must be very gratified now that the strike is over. I'm sure we all can breathe a sigh of relief that the firemen are back.
Yeah.
Well, then, going back though to the question of labor relations, how would you say the labor relations are good, or how would you say they're good, or there's room for improvement in the city of Halifax?
Well, I think it could have, maybe what we could have did, I don't know what the cost would have been, but
Yes.
maybe the best way we could have dealt with it maybe would be to send it to arbitration. But when the province stepped in with Justice Lauren Clark,
Yes.
and let him mediate a settlement, I think that took the city more or less off the hook, and the city wasn't creating a settlement, and we were willing to stand by with whatever decision he made, and I think that's what brought the settlement in the fire dispute.
Hmm. Well, going back to your ward again, many people have raised concerns about the state of affairs on Godigan Street. You've been very successful with the housing developments on south of Godigan on Brunswick, and you're doing other work north of Godigan and so on. But people have expressed concerns that there's been a general decline in the Godigan Street area. How do you feel about the Godigan Street area? Do you have anything in the works in terms of dealing with Godigan Street?
Yes, we have. The city, along with the province, we have the Main Street program, which is in progress right now, and I think within the next year or so, you're going to see some major improvements on Godigan Street. I think right now we have we just opened up the first phase of the Falkland Street walkway about three weeks ago, and right now we have the plaza, which will be finished pretty shortly, within a couple of weeks or 3 weeks. And then we're looking at maybe the farmer's market, along with a multicultural building, which was next door to the plaza. And I think with all this coming along, unless you can see the facelifting by the stores, upgrading as far as painting and that, and I can see Godigan Street coming back. I think everybody's concerned about the area of Godigan Street, and the problem that we have on Godigan Street is you run into a problem as far as we could say, okay, the people want stronger police protection, and I think this will be coming about. I have mentioned this with the chief over the past couple of years, and right now we have a group of recruits in class, and they should be soon finished, and then we're looking at maybe a new beat on Godigan Street, which will give us an extra beat, and then police protection on the street will be a lot stronger. Plus, just recently, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been proposing a cultural center for the corner of Garish and Godigan Street, but changes have taken place there, and just at committee of the whole this week, the staff have come in with a recommendation, rather than lose the capital funding and the provincial funding for that, as far as cutbacks, which we hope that at least, say, the cultural center now be shifted to the George Dixon site, which will free up the land on the corner of Garish and Godigan by landscaping plus more housing for the area.
So the cultural center, which originally was going to be on the corner of Godigan and Garish, will now be on where the recreation field is on the Dixon Center?
It will be, there'll be $350,000 allocated for renovations to the George Dixon, along with the new cultural center, which will be tied into the George Dixon Center.
I see. So the existing building will be refurbished and expanded.
Right.
To incorporate the
yes.
center.
It would be a new construction with an extension about $350,000.
I see.
For the cultural facilities.
And then you'll have infill housing on the...
Infill housing. We're looking for infill housing, plus the corner and that faces on Godigan Street will be landscaped, and it should be really nice for the area.
Well, now, while we're talking about Godigan Street, how significant have the large shopping centers in Halifax, Dartmouth been in the decline of Godigan Street? A lot of the merchants leaving and going into the large shopping center complexes? Has that been part of the problem on Godigan Street as well?
That has been a problem, but I think what has taken place, which we hope that we can change that now. Parking has been a problem for the merchants on Godigan Street, because there has to be short-term parking there.
Yes.
So that if somebody wants to come down and park on Godigan Street, they should be able, half hour, 15 minutes or something, so they can leave their car and go in, and we're hoping that will take place. This is what we have to have, because otherwise if you come down to pick up something at one of the stores and you come out and you have a $15 ticket, you're not going to come back to the area. And there's major improvements, maybe, as Sobeys have been looking at it. They have a lot of properties on Godigan Street, and they're looking at changing the store and tying it in with the Bank of Montreal there on the corner, and that maybe if the interest rates and that comes down, I could see a major shopping mall going in on Goddigan Street in that location that will change the location of the Nova Scotia liquor store that has, to some people, has created a problem in the spot where it is. But rather than lose the store from that area, it was better to put it there on a temporary basis because that does generate a lot of people to the area.
That's right, right. Well, I'd like to move away from the discussion of the issues, if I could, for a moment, to a discussion of Graham Downey, the person, and begin by asking you, what caused you to go into politics in the first instance, Graham?
Well, I look at it this way, that I've been always associated with, I guess, with government or working around elections over the past 22 years. And it seems like when you're out there working on the other end for somebody else, that whoever I worked for, it seems like the area that I was chairman of, I could always win that area on election day. So I felt pretty strong that if I can do that for somebody else by working for them, why shouldn't I take a chance if it ever comes about? Why shouldn't I run for office myself? So I decided in '71 that I would run. And the first time I ran, as I said, it was David McKean was the incumbent at that time, so I ran against him, and it was Cedric McDonald. So I finished second in a field of 3. So I said, I said to myself, and I'd fared off quite well in '71, so I looked at I'd take another crack at it when it come up in '74, and it happened that David at that time decided that he would run for mayor and left the seat open, so then I figured that I have a good shot, and in '74 I was elected. It was close, but I won by 15 votes.
Yeah.
So since then I've been running ever since.
Right. Well, this, I guess, would be what, your fourth term of office?
Yes, this is this was my 4th term, and it made me feel good because it's been the first time in the city of Halifax that an alderman has been elected in Ward 3 for consecutive terms, and it made me feel good. After.
I guess perhaps you're the next. I think there's only one other person on council, is there not, that's got more seniority than you on the council now?
Yes, Alderman Meyer has been there since '62 or so. He has 20 years. So I'm next to Alderman Meyer.
Right. Well, now, I guess there are ups and downs to any particular job that a person gets involved in. Has there ever been occasions when you've regretted going into politics, into political office?
No, I don't think. I enjoy this. It's the type of work that I like. I like doing it. I like receiving the calls, and I like trying to help people. If I couldn't do that, well, then I wouldn't. I don't do it for myself. I do it to try and make improvements. I'm so used to doing this. I look around at when in the younger days I used to sponsor a lot of baseball teams, and I think through that got me into this because I met so many people, and I think in this field as an alderman you meet so many people and you got so many different ways of how to get the job done, and I like working like that, and it made me feel happy that I could assist somebody else, and I feel good doing it.
Well, I guess over the years you've established a pretty effective team of workers in your ward. We were talking earlier about some of the people that had helped you in your election. I guess.
Yes, I would say that my official agent, Linda Borden, has been working with me, and she does just an excellent job along with my wife. I think my wife does. She's the type of lady that would deals. She can get around with everybody, and she's so useful to me. And basic, I think all the people that work for me, I think this is what you got to look at. I go out and bang the doors, and then on election day we can put the team together, and we make it work. And I bang the doors on election day, and I bring the people out. I circle all the polls, and I think everybody works together, and we know how to make them. You can't do it by yourself. You got to have a team, and we have a good working team, a good organization, and I think that's part of the part of the thing that makes you get elected, because everybody seems to work together on election day. We know what we're doing. If we need to get the cars out there, and we go around and we try and take them out, and the people seem to come along with us.
Well, you've been very successful to this point. Your ward is an interesting ward. It covers quite a diverse constituency. You have, on one end of the constituency, you have the Goddigan Street area and the Creighton Street area and so on, and it goes over, and on the other end of the ward you have the South Street area, and then you have the downtown core business area and so on. So you've got quite a diverse geographical as well as diverse social cultural ward. Is there any one particular part of the ward that you get your support from, or do you have strength right across the ward?
No, I would say that my strength is all over the ward. I think this election proved it to us too. I think the number of opposed that we have won in the south end of the ward towards the center part of the ward and to the north end of the ward. I think senior citizens, there's a lot of senior citizens complex which plays a great part of my area, and you take one over the tone of this election. I think we canvassed them buildings something maybe 4 and 5 times in there, and I think the support will show that we won in the Northwood Manor, Northwood Center, and the Towers. We took all them buildings, and in the south end we took the buildings on Spring Garden Road, and we took the general area in the old part of the city, which they call Smithville, and
yes.
We're very strong all over, and the vote has, the polls we did lose maybe by 4 votes, and so we did good,
Yeah.
We took 14 out of 26 this time, so that's, to me I thought it was good.
Yeah, right across the
Yes.
across the ward.
Right
support.
across the board, yeah.
Well, now we don't have many blacks in Nova Scotia in political office. I think probably you're one of maybe 5 or 6 across the province that are involved in municipal politics. What advice could you give to anybody who would be interested in going into politics, particularly at the municipal level?
Oh, well, I would encourage them. I think this is what we have to do. I would encourage them to get involved. I was hoping this time that there would be more blacks running in other parts of the city. In fact, some of my friends, I have encouraged them to run in other parts of the area, because I think this is what we have to do. I think when you look at the area of Ward 3 compared with Ward 5, the portion of blacks that are in there, I think there are more blacks in the Ward 5 area than there are in the Ward 3 area. So I would think it's a great test, and I think we have to get out and get into the other areas, and I would encourage them to get involved in municipal government, because I think that's where the work is being done. I think the number of calls that you get at the municipal level is more than the MLAs and the MPs. I think we're doing the work. We do the work on a daily basis, and the work has to be done.
Could I conclude from that remark that you don't have any aspirations about running at either the provincial or the federal level, or maybe I'm wrong in ruling that out?
No, I think the timing will be the key when I decide to run as for the province. I think the timing will be right. I think I never wanted to run and leave without filling my term, and I think I'll have to time it when the timing is right. I think it's proven this election that when you look, I think basically, and I have to say that, this election was run more or less as because it was run all across the province all in a day. So I would say the civic election here was a test as a municipal, as a mini provincial election, because the candidates were more or less on party lines.
Yes.
And I knew it because I could see the workers around who
Yes.
were working, and I have to say that because when you look and you're out banging the doors, and I covered the area. I did it all in 3 weeks, banging the doors. So I knew that that it's quite a thing. But when you look at it 4 terms as representing an area, that I would have to be considered as maybe a provincial candidate in the future.
So you're not rolling out
No,
involvement
no, but the timing will have to be right.
Right. Well, now, has the fact that you're a black man, has that had any bearing at all, and has it helped or hurt you in any way in terms of your involvement in politics at this point?
No,
Or has it been a factor?
No, I never look at it that way. I'm there to represent the people of the city, and I never did say that at any time. I'm there, and I do which I figure is right, no matter who I'm representing. There's views that stands I have to take. There's development that goes up in the area, which, as an alderman, I try and help anybody. I think what is right for the area, I have to support, and what is wrong, I
Have to speak against it, of course.
speak against it.
Well, now, when the history books are written, and when one reflects back on your municipal career in politics, what would you like to have said about Alderman Graham Downey?
Well, I would say that
I know I'm putting you on the
No,
spot,
yeah.
but
I would say that I would like to see it. Maybe say Graham was a fellow born in the North End area, the city of Halifax, and came up from hard times and finally made to be a city alderman. I think one thing that makes me feel so good every time I walk in the city hall, that it will be there from now until generations after generations, that I was not only an alderman, I served the city as a deputy mayor, and my name is in the stone in the city hall, and that's, to me, I'm glad that the people of the area have elected me and give me the chance to become the first black alderman in the city of Halifax. To me, it's a great honor, and I couldn't do it without support from the people of the area, plus the other people of the city. I think the people over the years have been saying that the blacks should be represented with the city, and it gives them a chance to have somebody to try and speak for them.
gives them some voice.
And it gives them a little voice. And but I never run as a black alderman. I run as an alderman, and I think.
As an alderman who happens to be black.
Yeah, an alderman that has to be black, and I think people know that, and I think people know that the issues. I work for the issues of the Ward 3 and throughout the city.
Right. Perhaps offer some inspiration to other
And
black youngsters as well who might want to follow
That's
in your
right.
footsteps. In fact, it may be a little early to ask you to write your history, in the sense that you haven't ruled out entering into provincial politics. So there's much more yet to be written, perhaps, in the history of Graham Downey. But we're getting signs that we've got to wrap. I want to thank you, Graham, for being our guest on Black Horizons. Hope you'll come back some other time and we'll talk again. Want to thank you for watching. Join us next week.